Hi, and welcome. This is David. Once again, thank you for your time. And we are going to go into a topic entitled The Guide to Salvation. All right, let's get started. The way to recognize your brother is by recognizing the Holy Spirit in him. I have already said that the Holy Spirit is the bridge for the transfer of perception to knowledge. So we can use the terms as if they were related, because in his mind they are. This relationship must be in his mind because, unless it were, the separation between the two ways of thinking would not be open to healing. All right, let's slow down and look at these phrases slowly. So the way to recognize your brother, and by brother here, I would, to me, it's clear that the cause is talking about the sonship. Right? We've already discussed what the sonship is. So when you see the word brother being used here, it's you should try and put in your mind the idea of the sonship. In other words, the whole of creation as an extension of the Creator. The reason why the word brother is being used is because of the idea that we are one. Okay? And so the way to recognize such is to see the Holy Spirit, or rather the higher self or the higher mind, in the other person. Okay? So this relationship must be in his mind because, unless it were, the separation between the two ways of thinking, meaning, let's say illusion and truth, or you could even put it as vision and perception. Yeah? So unless this relationship is in his mind, the healing of the separation would never be possible. Yeah. So he is part of the Holy Trinity because his mind is partly yours and also partly God's. Okay. So that's a very amazing, interesting distinction to make note of. That your brother's mind, or in other words, any other person's mind, true mind, yeah, is partly your mind and also partly God's mind. Isn't that quite an interesting concept? In other words, we all are part of the same single mind. That's another way of putting that sentence. Yeah? Okay. So let's look at a bit more a clarification of this idea. So the Holy Spirit is the idea of healing. So here they are defining the higher self or the higher mind as the idea of healing. In other words, they have redefined the Holy Spirit not just as mind, but as an idea with a particular purpose of healing the illusion of separation. Being thought, yeah, the idea gains as it is shared. Being the call for God, it is also the idea of God. Since you are part of the Creator, it is also the idea of yourself as well as of all His creations. The idea of the Holy Spirit shares the property of other ideas because it follows the laws of the universe, of which it is part. Okay? It is strengthened by being given away. Remember, we've already talked about how, let's say, if I have an idea and I share that idea with you, you will now have an idea you never had before. And because you've had it, you will actually strengthen the idea in me as well. Okay? And so here we're looking at the laws of the universe that govern ideas. They are strengthened by being given away, by sharing. It increases in you as you give it to your brother. Remember, we said the way to recognize your brother is to recognize the Holy Spirit in him, the idea of healing in him. Okay? Your brother does not have to be aware of the Holy Spirit in himself or in you for this miracle to occur. In other words, it will just happen. Okay? He may have dissociated the call for God, just as you have. This dissociation is healed in both of you as you become aware of the call for God in him and thus acknowledge its being. So to me, this is sort of like a shortcut that we are being given over here. Yeah? That you simply need to recognize the Holy Spirit in other people, and it will automatically create a miracle whereby this idea is strengthened in you as well. Okay, continuing with the guide to salvation. There are two diametrically opposed ways of seeing your brother. They must both be in your mind because you are the perceiver. Okay. They must also be in his because you are perceiving him. That's very, very interesting. So here they're saying that there are two totally opposite ways that you can actually see your brother. One is that you are one, and the other is that you are separate. And because you have such perception, the capability of such perception, it means that they are both in your mind. Yeah? Because you're the one who's... In other words, if they were not in your mind, you'd not be able to perceive them. Remember, we see what we believe. We see what we believe. Okay? Now, then it also goes on to say that because you are perceiving your brother, somebody else, that means this idea or this concept of being separate and also the potential of being one or realizing that we are one is also in your brother. Otherwise, once again, you'd not perceive him. See him through the Holy Spirit in his mind and you will recognize him in yours. What you acknowledge in your brother, you are acknowledging in yourself. And what you share, you strengthen. Okay, that's very interesting. The voice of the Holy Spirit is weak in you. That is why you must share it. It must be increased in strength before you can hear it. Okay? So this is why they're encouraging us all to share these concepts. Because the voice is weak in us. So we must share it because, remember, that's the way you grow this voice. Yeah? It is impossible to hear it in yourself while it is so weak in your mind. It is not weak in itself, but it is limited by your unwillingness to hear it. So the voice itself is not weak in itself. It just appears to be weak because we have refused or we are unwilling to hear it. If you make the mistake of looking for the Holy Spirit in yourself alone, your thoughts will frighten you because by adopting the ego's viewpoint, you are undertaking an ego-alien journey with the ego as a guide. This is bound to produce fear. Wow! I think that's such a powerful warning. I think that is a most powerful warning. It actually says if you make the mistake of looking for the Holy Spirit in yourself alone. Do you see why this topic is being now entitled The Guide to Salvation? Because it really does give you the way forward. And the way forward is this. You must see. I think this is a good time to remember the lesson that we learned about charity much earlier on. Charity, the definition of charity, according to the Course in Miracles, is when you look and recognize the enlightened, or let's call it the Christ, within your brother, even if he or she cannot see it in themselves. That's what we talked of as being the definition of charity. Okay? Now I'd like us to bring that back here to this lesson. Okay? So, to me, this is saying, this is what I'm understanding here. The way to salvation, the way to waking up is through charity. If we can put it in another way. The way to waking up is through charity. And charity, we said, is to see the Holy Spirit or the Christ in your brother, even if he or she cannot see it in themselves. You see? So rather than looking at people and saying, oh, this guy is such a bad guy, this guy is such a useless guy or weak person, or we always judge people one or the other. We have, various judgments about any one person. I mean, it's very difficult for us not to judge people one way or the other, So it's now calling for the opposite. It's don't judge them, see divinity in them, and that is how you will see divinity in yourself. If you try to see divinity in yourself alone without trying to see divinity in others, this is bound to produce fear, because you're coming at it from the ego's point of view of separation and using the ego as the guide. So have you got that? It's a very, very clear, simple statement. You have to see divinity in others for this to work. Delay is of the ego because time is its concept. Both time and delay are meaningless in eternity. I have said before that the Holy Spirit is God's answer to the ego. Everything of which the Holy Spirit reminds you of is in direct opposition to the ego's notions, because true and false perceptions are themselves opposed. The Holy Spirit has the task of undoing what the ego has made. He undoes it at the same level on which the ego operates, or the mind would be unable to understand the change. So I guess here, we started discussing the concept of time in this particular slide, we've just said that both time and delay are meaningless in eternity. However, the Holy Spirit has to undo the errors of the ego at the same level at which the ego operates. In other words, it has to undo the errors of the ego in this concept of time, within the concept of time. Otherwise, the mind would be unable to understand the change. Okay? So although time is meaningless, the ego uses it because that's the only way the mind will be able to understand the healing. I have repeatedly emphasized that one level of the mind is not understandable to another. So we've already covered that, like illusion is not understandable to, the illusion of separation is not understandable to unity, and unity is not understandable to the illusion of separation. So it is with the ego and the Holy Spirit, with time and eternity. Eternity is an idea of God, so the Holy Spirit understands it perfectly. Time is a belief of the ego. So the lower mind, which is the ego's domain, accepts it without question. The only aspect of time that is eternal is now. Wow, that's a very, very loaded little short paragraph. Okay? Let's look at the second half of it. They have called eternity an idea of God. An idea of God. Whereas they have called time a belief of the ego, not an idea, a belief, not a fact, a belief of the ego. Okay. And then they have gone on to say that the only aspect of time that is eternal is now. Here now, the power of now. Now. The here now, the power of now. The future and the present are not eternal. The only aspect of the belief of the ego called time that is real and therefore eternal is now. Right now. The eternal moment of now. I think if you have at all spent any time studying, metaphysics, or books such as The Power of Now, or A Conversation with God, or any of these those kind of books, Celestine Prophecy, any of this, you will see over and over again that it has been emphasized that now is the only moment of reality. Now, live in the now, live in the now, live in the now. They keep saying that. Forget about daydreaming about the future and worrying about it, and regretting over the past. They don't exist. Only now. Okay. The Holy Spirit, or the higher self, higher mind, is the mediator between the interpretations of the ego and the knowledge of the spirit. His ability to deal with symbols enables him to work with the ego's beliefs in its own language. Also, his ability to look beyond symbols into eternity enables him to understand the laws of God, for which he speaks. He can therefore perform the function of reinterpreting what the ego makes, not by distraction, but by understanding. Understanding is light. Light. But you yourself do not know this. It is therefore the task of the Holy Spirit to reinterpret you on behalf of God. Again, because we said the Creator does not recognize the illusions of the ego. That's why we need the Holy Spirit. I think you remember that. You cannot understand yourself alone. Again, that whole idea of charity, of seeing divinity in others, is coming in. You cannot understand yourself alone. This is because you have no meaning apart from your rightful place in the sonship. Do you see what I mean? Here it says, you don't have meaning. In other words, you don't really have existence outside of the sonship. So you cannot try to understand yourself from the viewpoint of the ego or from within the illusion of separation. It's not, because you're not going to understand yourself, because yourself is not the image that your ego has made for you. Yourself is part of the sonship. It is the sonship. And the rightful place of the sonship is the Creator. So you cannot understand yourself alone outside of the Creator, outside of the sonship. It will never work. This is your life, your eternity, and yourself. It is of this that the Holy Spirit reminds you. So you see, the job of the Holy Spirit is again to make you understand yourself by reminding you of who you really are. It is this that the Holy Spirit sees. This vision frightens the ego because it is so calm. Peace is the ego's greatest enemy because, according to its interpretation of reality, war is the guarantee of its survival. Okay? So have you seen that? Peace is the ego's greatest enemy because conflict is the only way the ego can survive, because conflict means separation. Thus, the ego becomes strong in strife, in conflict. If you believe there is strife or there is conflict, you will react viciously because the idea of danger has entered your mind. The idea itself is an appeal to the ego. The Holy Spirit is as vigilant as the ego to the call of danger, opposing it with his strength just as the ego welcomes it. The Holy Spirit counters this welcome by welcoming peace. Eternity and peace are as closely related as are time and war. So what a cool distinction. Peace is related to eternity, yet war is related to time. Therefore, the only way into salvation is once again through peace. And peace frightens the ego. Perception derives meaning from relationships. Relationships give perception meaning. Those you accept are the foundations of your beliefs. In other words, the relationships that you accept then form the foundations of your beliefs. The separation is merely another term for a split mind. The ego is a symbol of separation, just as the Holy Spirit is a symbol of peace. Okay? What you perceive in others, you are strengthening in yourself. This idea is so important. We have said it before many times. Whatever you judge, remember, I think you've heard this before. There's a saying that says, judge not, lest you shall be judged yourself. Judge not, don't judge others, or else you will be judged yourself. as well. There's also another saying that says, do unto your brother what you'd like to be done unto you. Okay? Now, take those two sayings together and then read this sentence. What you perceive in others, you are strengthening in yourself. So if you perceive, if you choose to perceive divinity in others, you will strengthen that self-perception in you as well. If you choose to perceive separation and anything else that is part of that whole negativity cloud in others, you, whether you like it or not, you're strengthening it in yourself. So when you go perceiving other people as, let's say for example, stupid, you're perceiving in yourself stupidity, or rather strengthening the perception of in yourself of stupidity. Yeah. Do you see what I'm saying? It's like as if the world is a mirror. Yeah. So that's why it's so important, this lesson, this guide to salvation that we're being given, to realize that you can never escape from this rule. All right, let's move on. You may let your mind misperceive. That's possible. You can allow your mind to perceive, incorrectly. But the Holy Spirit, or the higher mind, or the higher self, lets your mind reinterpret its own misperceptions. So that's how the Holy Spirit works in fixing these mistaken perceptions. The Holy Spirit is the perfect teacher. He uses only what your mind already understands to teach you that you do not understand it. That's really cool. The Holy Spirit can deal with a reluctant learner without going counter to his mind. That's amazing. I think that's very important. To be able to deal with a reluctant learner without going counter to his mind. Because part of it is still for God. Despite the ego's attempts to conceal this part, it is still much stronger than the ego, although the ego does not recognize it. So once again we said, the divinity in you is way more powerful than the ego, yet you don't hear it because you refuse to hear it. But you don't have to fear. The ego has never and will never match the strength of the divinity in you. The Holy Spirit recognizes it perfectly because it is his own dwelling place. Now that's, is at home. The place in the mind where he is at home. So the Holy Spirit automatically recognizes the healed state of your mind, or part of your mind, because that's where he dwells. He's not going to dwell in the part of the mind and that believes in separation. Okay. And you yourself are at home there too, because it is a place of peace, and peace is of God, of the Creator. You who are part of the Creator are not at home except in his peace. If peace is eternal, you are at home only in eternity. So that, did you see how that train went? What they're saying is that you can never be at home except for when you are in God's peace. Then you will feel totally at home. Right now you might feel all lost and weary and confused, and sometimes you don't know what's going on. But once you're at home, you'll just feel, yes, I'm at home. And the only place where you can feel that is within the Creator's peace, which, because we have said that peace is related to eternity and not to time, that means that you are at home only in eternity and not in time. When you are in time, you're not at home. When you're in eternity, you are at home. That's your natural state. The ego made the world as it perceives it. So in other words, you're projecting. The world does not exist separate from you. It is a projection of you. The ego made the world as it perceives it. But the Holy Spirit, the reinterpreter of what the ego made, sees the world as a teaching device for bringing you home. So while the ego might see the world as anything else, or maybe even as a million different things, the Holy Spirit sees the world as only one thing, as a teaching device for bringing you home. So that's why we mentioned before in this course that um, just by merely going through your life open to the Holy Spirit, the normal things that you do every day will be used to bring you back home. You don't have to like go up a mountain and become a monk and start chanting. Your normal day-to-day activities, looking after your family, work, and all that, will be used by the Holy Spirit to bring you home. The Holy Spirit must perceive time and reinterpret it into the timeless. He must work through opposites because he must work with and for a mind that is in opposition. Remember, the Holy Spirit is a perfect teacher because it can teach a mind to understand something new without, necessarily making that mind go into conflict. So that's why it says here that the Holy Spirit or the higher mind must work through opposites because he must work with and for a mind that is in opposition. Correct and learn, and be open to learning. You have not made truth, but truth can still set you free. Look as the Holy Spirit looks, and understand as he understands. His understanding looks back to God in remembrance of me. He is in communion with God always, and he is part of you. He is your guide to salvation because he holds the remembrance of things past and to come and brings them to the present. So this is that concept that, when you say, oh, may God guide me, what, in my understanding, that means is it's the Holy Spirit that is guiding you because it knows the, in quotes, future and present, and therefore it coordinates all these things and brings them to the present in the right, time and, perfectly. So that way it uses the world as a tool to guide you back home. And this is why they always say that everything happens for a reason, and there is no such thing as mistakes happening. Things are happening in the right order, in the right time for you. And the Holy Spirit makes sure of that as long as you let go and let him lead you. He holds this gladness gently in your mind, asking only that you increase it in his name by sharing it to increase his joy in you. So in a nutshell, the last slide we just looked at basically to me just means let go and let God. That's how I can summarize that last slide. But it's a good thing to have gone through it because then it gives you an explanation of why that idea is, it's such a good idea to do. Why is it good to surrender to divine will? Okay, not just good. Why is it the only real way out? So I hope that was useful, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Thank you.